Hey guys, Liquid Fire here. Thanks for joining me again tonight. Or for some of you, maybe it's the first time you've joined, so welcome to the channel. I appreciate you jumping in and joining in with us. So, over the last few months, I've done a ton of videos getting into the higher end mechanics, getting into the deep dives and things like that. But I have not really set aside the time to put together a new player's guide. Um, I think it's a new year, and what better time than on the new year to do a new player guide? It just seems apropos to do it on the New Year's. So that's what we're doing. We're going to try to put together what I hope is a pretty good compendium of tips and ideas for you to consider. Things that I hope will make the game easier for you to pick up and get going on. Some of the things are things I wish I knew a little earlier and would have made things a lot easier. So I want to try to kind of share as much of that with you tonight as I can. And hopefully, as you go through it, it all makes sense and it gives you some ideas and hopefully makes the game a little bit easier to get going with. It's not a hard game. It's really not. But there's some pretty interesting concepts in this game that are not necessarily in a bunch of other games. So I want to try to make it a little bit easier for the new guys to kind of get going. So, with no further ado, let's get started with some of the tips that I think would help out new players. So, first off, do the missions. So, I know it sounds kind of corny to want to go do a bunch of missions in hunting games. Okay, some people love them, some people hate them. I get it. But when you first start out, especially the main story in this purse, do the missions. So there's a few different reasons. A, it will give you some good starter cash, absolutely important. This game, the economy is player based, so you don't really struggle with money unless you taxidermize a ton of stuff. But it does get you started, and there's a good bit of gear to buy as you get started. So doing the missions will help you with that. But that's just a small reason why I say to do the missions. You will gain experience in the concepts of the game. So you'll get a feel for how things work by going through and doing the missions. It'll also kind of force you to go into different areas on the map, and you'll get an understanding going through the missions how some of the components work, like need zones and how time works and things like that. So definitely go through and do the missions. Now, there's a few different things. So we mentioned the main story mission in this purse as a starting point, and it absolutely is. Something to keep in mind in that is a lot of the story pieces together kind of on the fly as you go. So you'll go somewhere and do something, and it'll lead you to the next step. But there's a laptop in the main lodge, and there are missions that are part of the main story in that lodge. So if you find yourself kind of stuck and you can't find the next mission to do, you think you've done everything, take a look at the laptop and look for the restaurant missions. There is probably a restaurant order that you need to fulfill in order to continue the storyline. It doesn't necessarily feel like it's part of the main story, but the restaurant orders are part of the main storyline. So if you get stuck, that's a really good place to go check and see if you have a job to do there. There are some other missions you can pick up that are great to pick up, especially early in the game, and that is the cabin owners missions to unlock the private areas. So in this purse, there are 4 private areas that you can unlock, and it's really worthwhile to go to those cabins so you can unlock those missions. So in Nez Perce, you have Falls Reservoir, that's up the swamps in the northeast part of the map. She Devil, those are technically the mountains. They're over in the northwestern part of the map. Haley Witch, which is Highland Forest, that's in the southwestern part of the map. And Diamond Drill, which is Lowland Forest and is in the southeastern part of the map. And they are all 4 fantastic areas to hunt. And 100% it is worth going through and doing those missions to unlock that land to hunt in. People rave about Diamond Drill for the deer population in there. It's it's stacked. It really is. You can find a ton of great animals there. So do those missions to unlock the cabins. Now, if you don't want to do the missions, you can buy a pass for 4,500 bucks to open up those cabins. So each of them is 4,500 bucks each. Um, why pay when you can play and earn money along the way to open them up for free? But you can buy them. Even if you do buy them, you can still do the missions, so you can recoup your money, as it were. But yeah, it's up to you how you do it, but it's definitely 100% worth opening those up. You also have some missions out of the camps. So there's little campsites across the map, and those camps will have a map there, and often, not often, once on each of the different camp zones, you may find that there's like a poster on it or whatever that you can click on. And whenever you do that, it'll open up a mission. And those are your camp missions. And they pay well. Some of them are difficult, depending on where you're at and what they are, depending on the map or whatever. But absolutely, it's worth doing the missions. It does, obviously pay you, but it kind of forces you to go into places to explore the map and to hunt things that maybe you wouldn't necessarily hunt. And I think all of that is really good for you as a new player to the game, to explore things, to get a feel for how it all works, and to make some money. So I talked about clicking on the map. I'm going to kind of jump to the maps overall. So in each of the cabins that you find, this first we're talking about the 4 private cabins, there is a map on the wall in there. And the same thing in the main lodge. There's a map on the wall there. You want to be sure to go into those and click on the map. It's going to open up some information on the map, the game map itself, not the map on the wall, but it's going to open up information on the game map, as well as kind of give you a high-level idea of what that particular region is like and what type of animals are there. The same thing is true with the little camps. So if you see a camp zone and there's a big, tall, mounted map, be sure to click on it. That's where you can get the missions at as well, but clicking on that map to explore it will open up some information on your map, and you can tell when you have the the camps displayed on your map, there will be a little question mark if you haven't clicked on the map to explore everything. So definitely do the missions and click on the maps while you're in the cabins and at the campsites. The next big thing, and this, it's kind of controversial in a way to say this, but I'm going to go ahead and say read the encyclopedia. There are a lot of new concepts in the game, and it does cover some of that stuff. But there is also a lot of information about the animals in the game. So whenever you first encounter a new species, so say you've not hunted at all and you run into something from a whitetail, maybe it's a feed zone for a whitetail, that information opens up more data on whitetail in the encyclopedia. So each time you interact with something from a whitetail, maybe you claim one, you pick up a couple different zones, you click on a trail, you click on urine or something. All of that opens up more information in the encyclopedia. And once you have all the information, you'll have information on the animal itself, basic description, things like that. You'll have information on how their scoring works. So you'll know what a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5-star animal is in terms of score. You'll have their lifespan, so you'll understand that they're young for 2 years, adult for 4 years maybe, and then mature for 3 years, or whatever the numbers are. You'll also have information on what their weights are as they grow through the different stages. So all of this information is in the encyclopedia. Now, sometimes there's a little bit of information that may be wrong. And that's why it's kind of controversial to say read the encyclopedia. But in the grander scheme, most of it is accurate. And there is a lot of information that you can learn through the encyclopedia. So it's absolutely worth taking a look through it to get a good feeling for a lot of the different concepts in the game, a lot of the different elements that you're going to be working with. So read the encyclopedia. Now the next one is back to actual hunting, and this is probably one of the biggest tips that I can really give you, and that is while hunting, go slow. If you're coming from a game like, say, Call of the Wild, you're going to want to go too fast. You need to slow down. This game, it's not at all about running and gunning. It's about slow approaches and accurate shots. So when you're moving, you can move in three different stances. You can walk, you can crouch, or you can crawl. Crawling, it's not really a good mode of transportation, but you can use it to reposition if you want to. If you're really, really intent on trying to crawl in close to things, yeah, you can do it, but it's just not really useful most of the time, just to be honest. But walking and crouching, that's going to be your two primary um, modes of transportation. You have three different speeds in each of those modes. So you can, basically run, walk normal speed, or walk slowly. And same thing with crouching. You can crouch fast, crouch normal, or crouch slow. And that's going to be your main speeds most of the time, other than driving around, of course. But when you're moving on foot, those are going to be your three speeds. You can walk within a couple hundred yards of most animals, depending on where they are and what they are. But most of the time, you can walk to within a couple hundred, maybe 250 yards, meters, whatever, from most animals. And then you want to start moving into the crouch mode. And as you get closer and closer, you need to start slowing down more and more and stopping. So here's the big thing about spooking from movement. In this game, that's the number one spooker. Movement is what's spooking things. It's the noise that you make while you're moving. And basically what it does is it builds up like a meter. So it's not something that the instant you stop moving, you stop making noise. What it is, it's a meter that fills up. Think of it like a thermometer. And once it hits 100 degrees, you have alerted the animals. Once it hits 120 degrees, you've spooked the animals. So when you're moving, that meter is filling up, and then when you stop, it stops where it's at and slowly starts coming back down. But even if you're moving at the slowest speeds possible, that meter is still slowly filling up. So you can't just, kind of slow down and think you're okay. You actually have to do a stop and go in this game to keep from spooking things. So when you're like 150 meters away, you've started to crouch walk. Don't just continue to crouch walk nonstop. Crouch walk for, 5 or 8 seconds and then stop for a few seconds. Let that meter start to drain back down. And the closer you get, the longer you need to be stopping and the shorter amount of time you need to be walking. So further away, you can pretty much walk constantly. You get to about 250 to 200, then you need to start stopping a little bit. You get under that 150, you need to start stopping a whole lot more and be sure that you're crouching. And the closer you get, the more you stop and the shorter amount of time that you move. Again, that meter just fills up. And once it's full, there's nothing you can do. It'll alert them, and then very quickly after, it'll spook them. So stop and go is absolute key. And again, the closer you get, the more you need to be stopping. Now, something that'll help out a little bit is when you're approaching an animal, bring up your binoculars. Look at them, and you can move with the binoculars up. But keep in mind, it still counts the same whether you have the binoculars up or not. You're just moving at the slow speed. But I tend to notice most people stop a lot more while they have the binoculars up to look at things. So you kind of naturally start stopping and going more often by having the binoculars up. So not only are you moving at the slower speed, but you're stopping more. And it just feels a lot more natural to have the binoculars up and be stopping while you're looking through them versus just stop and go, stop and go, stop and go while you're trying to walk in on things. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Something else that I think is imperative for the new player is to walk the water. What I mean by that is literally find water on the map and walk along it to pick up the drink zones. So in this game, you have three different types of zones. You've got your drink zone, your sleep zone, and your eat zone. Now, the drink zones are generally going to be right around the water. They're also fairly easy to hunt in most of the maps. Lenticoto, they're a little more difficult, but in most maps, the drink zones are the easier zone to get to. Transylvania, that one's kind of, I don't want to say that they're easy, but they're not really super hard. The problem in Transylvania is the way the map is designed. There's a lot of tall stuff around the water in many places, so it sometimes is a little more challenging there. But we're talking brand new player. You're just starting out. You're in Nez Perce, so walk the water and look for the zones along the water. So basically, every herd is going to have a drink zone. Birds are a little bit different, but your deer, your bear, your foxes, they all have drink zones. So keep that in mind. And whenever you see water, like a pond, circle around it. There will be a ton of zones, well, maybe not a ton, but there will usually be a few zones around it. And all of your big game have drink, eat, and sleep. Your small game sometimes gets a little bit different, but in the grander scheme of things, um, walking the water is going to find you a ton of zones, and that'll help you get the deer, the bear, the goats, whatever it is, on your map. So once you find one zone, then that herd icon will show up on your map, and then you'll know which herd you're looking at. And walking the water will give you tons and tons and tons of zones, and it's one of the easier areas to hunt most of the time. It'll also give you a general idea of where that particular herd is. The herd icon, so the little deer on your map, is going to be in the center of its range. So if you find that there's a drink zone down by this pond, you find a zone there, you click on it, you see there's a deer on your map. That deer is going to be central to his range. Okay, so that herd is going to be somewhere around that particular icon. So that's another good reason to walk the water to pick up the new zones. So that's kind of like the first big things to really think about. Do the missions, read the encyclopedia, go slow, walk the water. And like I said, when you're doing the missions and stuff, going to the cabins, click on those maps. Don't forget about that. So kind of the next level of things to really start working on is to focus on your shots. So I mentioned earlier that this game is all about high quality shots. And that's the truth. If you are taking pop shots and you're just kind of wounding stuff, you're not going to kill a lot easily. And the shots that you take that do get a flesh kill or something like that, you're going to have to track forever. So the first thing I want you to focus on is making good heart and lung shots. So a bad shot, you're going to track forever. A good shot will usually drop the animal in under like 175 meters or so, oftentimes less than that. But if you get a critical shot, it'll usually drop them right on the spot. So that's something to keep in mind. Focusing on good shots is key for this game. You end up making more money because you're not taking 2 or 3 shots at an animal. B, you don't have to track them nearly as far, which tracking can be hard in this game. And C, it's going to allow you to quickly move from from herd to herd, I should say. So focus on making really good shots. Now, once you make that shot, check the blood at the impact site. So whenever you shoot, say we're talking about a deer, so you shoot a deer, it's a really good idea to go ahead and mark on the map where you shot it at. So you can put the little blue tracking icon, that little blue marker, put it on the map where you shot it at so you know exactly where to go to look for it. And sometimes it may be beneficial when you're just starting to even put that down before you even shoot, just so you know that you don't forget it. But put that marker down so you know where to go to look for the blood. Take your shot. Hopefully it's a good shot and they just fall over. If not, they may wander off a little bit and fall over. They may, run 100 yards. You can watch them and get a feeling over time whether or not it was a good shot or not. You'll see their head drop down. They'll run a little slower, things like that. If you have hunter sense on, then you can also see the blood trail very easily as it glows and flashes through your binoculars or scope as they run off in the distance. So if you see a blood trail, 100 yards away and it's still dropping blood, that animal's going to go down. So that's a good way to know for sure you got a decent shot. But go to the impact site where you shot the deer and check the blood there. It will tell you whether or not it was a kill shot. So there will be a bigger spot of blood where you hit them at. Go click on that. So it'll tell you that it may be a fast or slow time to death, or it may say that they're going to survive. So if you see animal survived, well, there's no point in tracking it. If you see that they'll die quickly or they'll die slowly, they're going to die. It's just a matter of how far you have to track them. So keep that in mind. In terms of knowing whether or not your shot's going to actually be fatal, pay attention to your bullet energy. So in some games, you'll not be able to use a weapon on an animal. So maybe you can't use a 223 on a red deer, or maybe you can't use a 338 on a roe deer. In Way of the Hunter, you can use any weapon on any animal. It's up to you. Just like real life, it's up to you. Now, the problem is if you're using something very weak on a very big animal, it becomes exceedingly difficult to be able to get a kill shot. So you need to understand the bullet energy. So if you're using hunter sense, when you bring up your scope to shoot, you'll see that you have a dot on the screen where the bullet impact is going to be. That showcases the accuracy of the weapon. And when you hold it over an animal, if you're in the correct energy range, then that will actually change colors to let you know that you're in the appropriate range. Now, if you're overkilling it, it won't change. If you're underkilling it, it won't change. So, that's something to keep in mind. But it will also show you in the top right what your actual energy is. So you can always have a good idea of what energy level you're using for whatever animal it is. And that's something to keep in mind. If you're taking a 700 or 800 meter shot with a 223 at a red deer, that's asking a lot out of a really small round. May not be the best bet, but you'll be able to look at it and have an idea of what type of energy it's going to hit with to help you determine whether or not that's a reasonable shot to take. Now, conversely, you could take that same 700 meter shot with a 338 and you should see a pretty high level of energy available to you. So that's something to keep in mind. So pay attention to your bullet energy. It's not the type of game where you can't use something. You just pay for it if you do it wrong. So if you go too big, so say 338 on a roe deer, you lose some money. That's the reality. Your hunter score will be negatively impacted. You'll have more meat wasted, and you lose money. Conversely, if you use something that's too small, the animal may survive, or you may have to shoot it 2 or 3 times, and you may end up losing money because of that. And either way you go, you're losing money. So just pay attention to your energies, and kind of keep in mind that bigger guns hit harder, they do more damage. Smaller guns hit less, they do less damage. And the more damage you do, the less money you make. So just kind of be aware of that. Now at the same time, the bigger the animal is, the more money you make too. So there's a balance there. If you're taking on Cape Buffalo, you don't need to be using the 243. You want to use something that's going to take it down quickly, efficiently, one shot. one shot, one kill is the true mantra here. You really want to be accurate. Um, we'll get into some weapons later on, but it's hard to go wrong with either the Armad 270 or the SM12 300 for two really versatile guns. But just pay attention to your energy. Now, something that's kind of tied to the guns, scopes. And this is a huge point here. Scopes are shared. So you can buy one scope and put it on every rifle you have. You don't have to buy a new scope for each rifle. So what that tells me is, as a player, I want to buy the best scope first and be done. So to that end, I highly recommend buying the 21X, what's the Elite? I can't remember the entire name. I'll look it up and put it on here. But the 21X scope is hands down the best scope in the game. And it's really difficult to debate that. It has the most zoom. It's got the largest range of zoom from high zoom to low zoom. It's a first focal plane scope. And as far as I know, it's the first focal plane scope in any hunting game. So whenever you're looking through the scope and the wind's blowing from right to left, you can hold it on, say, the first tick mark to the right at a zoom of 4, at a zoom of 12, at a zoom of 21. You can hold it at the same spot and it's going to hit in the same place. That's the power of a first focal plane scope. What that means as a player is you're able to figure out your holds and stuff a whole lot better and be a lot more accurate if you're not using hunter sense. If you're using hunter sense, you don't need it. It'll be a big dot on the screen. And in that case, the 21X gives you the biggest zoom. But sometimes 21's really too much, and you can roll this back and really zoom out as well. Now, if you're not a fan of the reticle, the 15X, the Overguard, has a completely different style, much cleaner reticle. And it's probably the second, maybe third best scope in the game. I really like the 16X as well. But if I were to tell anybody to buy a single scope, it would be the 21X. But keep in mind, scopes are shared. So you only have to buy one. So whether it's the 15, the 16, the 21, maybe you really like the big red Christmas tree of the 18X and don't like to see anything because the reticle's so thick, you can buy that and put it on all your weapons. But you only have to buy one. And that's the key thing here. The scopes are shared. Something else to keep in mind is you do have a photo mode. Now, this is kind of contentious to some to say, and controversial for sure. But don't be afraid to leverage the photo mode. So when you're in game, you can bring up, well, if you're not in Ranger, you can bring up the in-game camera and use it like a drone. Okay, it's that simple. So you can bring it up, you can fly it out, you can look at things. I don't want to say that it's really the best approach to use for every hunt and every animal and all that. It's really not. But there are times where it's just absolutely indispensable. So let's suppose that you're hunting a herd of whitetail and you've come across a hill and you hear them just on the other side, but you can't get an eye on them. You can take the camera mode, fly up over top of the hill, and take a look at them. Or maybe you're coming down into an open field and you want to see if there's anything in there. Fly the camera up in the air and go take a look, see if there's anything down there to go hunt. It doesn't magically kill the deer for you or anything like that, okay? So don't worry about anybody judging you too much about it. Play your game the way you want to. But it is an option. So you can use the photo mode to help kind of find things. It's also helpful sometimes when you shoot something and you can't find it. If you're struggling to find where it went down at, maybe it's in the woods, maybe it's in the water. You can use that photo mode and get up in the air and kind of look down, and it'll help you sometimes find things. But definitely leverage the photo mode. It's really handy when you're trying to stalk in on something and you can't tell if they're alerting or not. So as you're learning what that looks like, you can use the photo mode to kind of get an eye on them. Now, if they're all turned or staring at your character, yeah, they're alerted and you don't need to be moving. You need to stop and let them calm down before you move again. You can sometimes use it to help judge antlers. So if you're close enough and you're able to see the antlers, you can certainly use that to help judge things. So there's a lot of different pieces that the photo mode can help with. Again, I'm not going to say everybody should go use photo mode. I'm not going to judge anyone for using it or for not using it. It's just a tool. It's in game. Choose to use it if you want to. You don't have to, but it does sometimes come in handy. All right, so some of the other things that I wanted to kind of touch on. Let's talk about tracking. So I mentioned whenever you shoot an animal to put a blue marker down where you shot the animal at. As you're learning to follow these blood trails and stuff, it's often pretty handy to put down a series of blue markers as you go. The reason being is you may lose the trail, and then you can just go back to that blue marker and know exactly where you were at and where you were going, and pick back up on it and try to find the trail. Using hunter sense will help with tracking because it will make the blood glow, and you can also change the colors of blood and things like that if you want to. But when you're tracking, when you're learning to track especially, put down some tracking markers as you go along. It'll make it a lot easier for you to keep up with the trail. And sometimes you can kind of look at it and get an idea of where you think the next piece of blood may be if you're not seeing it. The blood does have indicators, so you can look at it and see which direction they're going. But having those markers will make it a little bit easier for you to keep up with where things are going. The next thing is following the game trails. So we talked about the zones a little bit earlier. There's the drink zone, the eat zone, and the sleep zone. And depending on which map, which region, etc., there could be 6, there could be 9, there could be as few as 2, depending on the animals. But Nez Perce, new player, you're going to be looking generally at 6 zones for all of your big game. So there will be 2 drink zones, 2 sleep zones, and 2 feeding zones. And they all tie together. So when you're looking at a zone, so let's suppose you're at a drink zone, there's going to be trails that lead to the drink zone and trails that lead from the drink zone. So they drink, they sleep, they eat, they drink, they sleep, they eat, they drink, they sleep, they eat, in that order every single time: drink, sleep, eat. So when you have a drink zone, there's going to be 2 trails leading away from the drink zone. They're going to go to the 2 different sleep zones for the animal. And there's going to be 2 trails coming into the drink zone, coming from the 2 different eat zones. So that's a lot of trails, okay? But you can follow those trails to find the additional zones. And finding zones is really handy in this game because it's where the animals are going to be at. And if you're in between it's hard to be in between the zone times, but if it's like an hour before drink zone, then you're usually going to find the animals moving from the eat zone to the drink zone. So knowing where those zones are, all 6 of them, or depending on the animal, could be more or less, but all of the zones that you can find, knowing where they are will make it much easier to find the animals. So following the game trails is how you can actually find where these zones are. So the tracks that you see in game are not dynamic. They're there constantly. And what they do is they lead you from one zone to the next. So you can literally go to one zone and follow all of the trails from there and find all of the other zones. And you just keep doing that from zone to zone, and you can open up all the trails. Now, it's hard for me to say that that's something that I would recommend doing for every zone there is, because there's the Way of the Hunter Toolbox, and it has all of the different zones listed in it. I don't want to get into that. There's a video about it. As a new player, I honestly recommend you not to open the Toolbox. Not until you've got a fair amount of time under your hands and really understand the game, because it kind of can run the hunting part of it if you just go from zone to zone. Um, the Toolbox is a great tool. It's super handy, and for any experienced players, 100% recommend using it. When you're first learning the game, I don't even suggest opening it up yet. Um, Learn the game, learn how to follow the game trails, get a feel for how the animals travel and all that. Um, Leave the Toolbox for a few weeks down the road at least. Something else, we were talking about following blood trails. Blood does eventually vanish, so it doesn't stay there forever. So keep that in mind. I don't know what the current time is. Last time I checked it, it was around 3 hours. But I've heard that now it stays until you cycle the day. So I just don't know. I'm not sure how long it takes to vanish anymore, but it does vanish. Um, Talking about shooting. So we talked about how important it is to make good heart and lung shots, things like that. Headshots do work. Okay, so you can take a headshot. It's risky. You can hit them in the head and not kill them. But if you do make a good brain shot, they drop instantly. The problem with that is for many animals, you lose the ability to taxidermy them. So there are some exceptions, but generally speaking, like if you're shooting a deer or whatever in the head, you're not going to be able to mount it. That's the risk you take. It may not matter if you're just culling something that you know you're not going to put on the wall and you want to drop it. You can do a headshot. I'm not ever going to recommend headshots as your primary target. It's just not very effective in the long run. The problems you run into with them turning their head just a little bit, and if you hit them in the head, it's either all or nothing. You either kill them on the spot or they run off. I can't think of a single instance where I've gotten a kill where they ran 100 meters or something and then fell over dead on a headshot. So, yeah, it works. It's an option, but probably better off to focus on good shots, especially if you want to taxidermize anything. So definitely keep that in mind. Um, I want to talk about herd management a little bit. So this game is really all about herd management, but just to be honest, that's really what it is. It's a herd management game, and the more time you spend on herd management, and the more time that you focus on killing the right things, the better your herds become. Okay. Now, as a brand new player, I'm not going to say focus too much on it, simply because you're just learning the game, and there's more important things than all of the specific details of herd management. Okay. But having said that, there is a little bit of information that I think is worth understanding to begin with that'll make things probably make a little more sense as you go. So I'll bring up an image here. So this is what I call the herd management cliff notes. Okay, so this will kind of get you started down the right idea. Again, this is not the details on herd management at all. There is a lot to it, and I'm not going to get into that for a brand new player. There's videos about herd management out there. You can watch them and get into the details of it. But as a new player, I think the Cliff Notes is more than enough to get you going the right direction. And I wouldn't even worry about it too much. When it comes to the mission animals, I ignore herd management completely. So if I need to kill a 3-star adult or 3-star mature or whatever, I go kill it. If I'm looking for a high fitness and I see a 3-star, boom, I'm dropping it. When it comes to the missions, they trump herd management for me, and that allows you to kind of get through the missions a little more quickly. So don't get too tied up on the herd management. It's not the end of the world if you kill the wrong thing. But I did want to take a moment to kind of go through the high level to kind of put you in the right direction. So the Cliff Notes here, basically only call a young or an adult male if they respond to the low fitness caller. So we'll talk about callers here. So every caller that you have has the ability to call in different types of animals. Okay, and some of them allow you to call in only females. Some of them allow you to call in low fit males, and some allow you to call in high fit males. So low fit versus high fit is just the 50% mark. So anything less than 50% is going to be considered a low fit animal, and they respond to the low fitness collar. Anything above 50%, that's 50 to 100%, is going to be considered high fitness, and they will only respond to the high fitness collar if there is one. So when you're looking at a young or adult, you can't judge them very safely in the field and truly know whether or not they're going to be low fit or high fit. You can judge horns and get an idea that they're probably not, a 95%, but 75 is not good when you're first starting out. You want to leave those in the herd. So if it's a young or an adult, use the collar and call in the low fitness version. If they respond, take them out. If they don't respond, leave them alone. Okay. So the first step when you're culling is starting with the youngest that responds to the low fitness collar. So if you have a young whitetail and a mature whitetail that are both responding to a low fitness collar, take out the young first. The mature is going to die on its own anyway, and when it does, it'll be respawned. So if you're only going to take one out, take the young out immediately. That gets it out of the herd. You get a respawn in its place. You're improving your herd management through the fitness average, and that mature is going to die anyway. So that will allow you to cycle through 2 animals with only killing 1 yourself. So always taking out the youngest responder is a good approach. It just makes it a little bit easier. But when you're looking at animals in the field, 1-star matures are safe to call. So if you're looking at a herd, you see a 1-star mature, again, mature, not young, not adult, but mature. You see a 1-star mature, you can pop it, drop it, no worries. A 2-star mature, that's a little more risky. So if they're really, really uneven, they're wonky looking, and you really are confident as a mature deer that they are junk, you can take the risk and call it. If they look pretty even, you might want to leave it alone. They could just be a young mature, a new mature, a mature who has only been mature for a year or 2. So looking at the 2 stars as a safe shot isn't something I recommend. Now, if you call them and they come into the low fit collar, drop them. Don't even think about it. If they're coming into the collar, that's your sign. Drop them. Generally speaking, you're probably going to be okay shooting most 2 stars, but the ones that bite you are going to hurt really bad when they do. As a new player, probably better to leave them alone, especially. As you have more and more experience for what the different racks look like, you'll start to get a better feel and be able to do a little bit better job of field judging. But even at that, there's some risk out there. I know I've taken some that I thought for sure were going to be a really crummy deer, and it ended up being something that I regretted doing. So just keep that in mind. 2s are a little more risky. A 3-star and 4-star, don't shoot them, leave them alone. We'll talk about why in some of the other videos, but just understand that leaving a 3 and 4 helps improve your overall herds. So do not shoot the 3s and 4s. Don't even bother with them. Just let them grow, and they'll either grow into a 5-star, at which point that's what you're after to hunt anyway. That's your trophy animals. That's the goal. So they either turn to that or they die on their own. Better to let them die on their own than to shoot them as a 3-star or a 4-star. That's kind of the cliff notes. Obviously, the 5 stars, like I said, they're your goal, and the real trick is to take them in their last year. That's when they are going to give you the highest score. So that's kind of the herd management cliff notes. There is a lot more to herd management, but again, as a new player to the game, I don't think that that's something that you really need to focus on yet. Just learning the basics will get you into a good habit and get your herds improving. And then you can always check out the videos on the details of herd management once you're kind of beyond that starter stage, you're comfortable, you're getting tons of gear, and you're really wanting to focus on improving your herds. All right, so the next thing I wanted to kind of get into is the starter gear. What type of things do you want to buy? And I think that this is probably something that's really important to a lot of people starting the game, because you have a limited amount of money to begin with. So starter gear is very important. So the first thing you're going to buy is the 243. And that's because you have to buy it for the main story. So there's no real way around it. The 243 is going to be your first purchase. Now, after the 243, this is where things really start to branch out, and there's a lot of different options. So the first thing you have to consider is whether or not you have any free weapons. So how do you get free weapons? Well, that's when you buy some of the arms packs. So when you first bought the game, maybe you bought it with the hunter pack. If you did, then that's going to come with the Cinnamon Sky the Jack, which is a really nice, pretty engraved double barrel shotgun. So if you have that, then you don't need to buy a shotgun. The other packs you have are the Steyr Arms pack and the Remington Firearms pack. So if you bought the Steyr pack at the very beginning, you'll have the Steyr Gams, which is a 6.5 Creedmoor. You'll have the Steyr SSG M1, which is also a 6.5 Creedmoor. You'll have the Steyr Monoblock Arm Mod Green-Brown, and that's a 270 in the monoblock frame. And you'll also get the, we call it the Mannlicher, that's not the correct pronunciation, but you'll get the Mannlicher CL2 full stock. That's your 6.3 by 6.2 by, what the heck is it? Oh my gosh. 9.3 by 62? Oh, hang on. Okay, I'm not sure why my brain's going crazy, but the Mannlicher is the 9.3 by 6.2. I should probably just edit that out and skip it all, but whatever. So you get the Mannlicher with the Steyr Gams pack. No shotguns, though, just those rifles. Now, with the Remington Firearms pack, you do get 2 shotguns and 2 rifles. So you get the 700 SPS 375, that's a rifle, and you get the 700 Alpha 1 7mm, that's also a rifle, and you get the 870 Super Mag shotgun and the 870 Fieldmaster rifled shotgun. So the Steyr pack is much more accurate. The Remington Firearms pack has shotguns. So that's kind of something to keep in mind. Now, if you have bought any of those special packs that give you weapons, you get the weapons for free in game. So anything that you pay for to get with real money, you get it for free in game. Anything that's free, like the free UTV, for example, you have to pay for it in game. So that's just something to keep in mind. So if they introduce a free weapon, you're going to have to buy it in game. If you buy a weapon pack, you get it for free in game. So the next thing that you buy is going to depend on whether or not you have any free weapons. If you do have free weapons, then that kind of takes a lot of the next steps kind of out of the way. But we're going to assume you don't have any free weapons, so you have to buy everything. So you bought the 243 because you had to have it for the main story. The next thing you're going to buy, I would recommend buying a shotgun. I personally would say the Waterfowler Pro 12 gauge would be the recommendation. If you really, really, really hate shotguns, you can use something like the Steyr Zephyr 22 long rifle, because you're going to need to take out birds and you're going to need to do it while preserving weight. So the 12 gauge, it's a good option. 22 is an okay option. I probably killed more with the 22 than I did with the 12 gauge. But as a recommendation to a new player, I'm going to say the 12 gauge semi-automatic is going to make it easier. There's missions like General Sal's chicken or pheasant, where you have to have X amount of pounds of bird, and things like that, where you need to be able to use the shotguns or the 22s. So I would recommend picking up the shotgun. The second purchase for me is always going to be to recommend the 21x scope. You can share it across all of your rifles. So you have a 30-30, you have a 243, maybe you have some of the free weapons, doesn't matter. Pick up the 21x scope. Before you even pick up a scope for the shotgun, pick up the 21x scope. It will make the 243 a very deadly gun. It'll make the 30-30 a more deadly gun. That scope, and if you don't go with the 21, go with the 15x, go with whatever it is, 16x, but get a good scope next. I do recommend the 21 above anything else. After that, you've got your shotgun, you've got your 21x scope, you currently have the 30-30 and the 243. The first rifle I would buy, again, this is assuming you don't have any of the free weapons, is the SM-12. It is a little more expensive than the 700 long range. They're both 300s, but the SM-12 is a superior weapon. It's just a better rifle than the 700 long range. It's more accurate, it holds more rounds, and that just makes it better. So that is going to be the first rifle that I recommend picking up after the 243. And again, I would get a shotgun first. So now you have the 30-30, you have the 243, you have probably the Waterfowler Pro 12 gauge, maybe the 22, but I would say the 12 gauge is the way to go. And you've got the SM-12. So you've got low tier animals covered with the 30-30 using the reduced recoil, and the shotgun, which you can use slugs, you can use birdshot, you can use buckshot. You've got your mid-level deer, your T5 stuff covered with a 243. You've got some different options with it that you can use, but it's a solid round. So you can use the 243 and take out T5s with no issues. You can use the 30-30 too. And then you've got the SM-12, which really puts you into a good spot for taking out any of your T6 animals. And the SM-12 is a very accurate rifle. It's not anywhere near the most accurate, but it's a very accurate rifle. So that kind of gets you started down the path of weaponry. So the next pieces you have to really think about is what's more important to you. I would recommend picking up some collars. The Rattlebag and the Kiyi would be the first two collars I would recommend picking up. So the Rattlebag will cover you for a ton of different animals, and it has low fit as a level 1. So you can use it to work on your perks, which we didn't really talk about the perks. They are important, but as a brand new beginning player, I don't want you to focus too much on the perks. After you get a feel for the game and things like that, then you can really start to work on the perks. And this would probably be one of the first ones I would recommend working on. But getting the Rattlebag will give you the ability to call in a ton of animals and low fits at that. So you can really start calling them in, shooting them, and working on your perks. You only need to kill 10 to get to level 2, and then use your high fit, kill 20 more, and you're done. You can then use all of your collars at all levels and call in anything you want. So I would recommend picking up the Rattlebag and the Kiyi very quickly following the SM-12. And this is before you even pick up the 10x binoculars or the stand or anything. To me, personally, the 10x binoculars are nice, but they're further down the chain of things that I worry about. I would rather get a number of different collars that I'm going to use before I even worry about the 10x binoculars. It's only a 2x difference. You're going from 8x to 10x. It's not a big deal. So I personally would still recommend picking up collars that you think you want to use. So if maybe you want to hunt red deer, you want to hunt moose, those that you really want to hunt, pick those colors up early on. A couple deer and you can afford a new collar, okay? They're not expensive. And if you do it right, you can get these leveled up quickly, be using them, and be making more money while you're using them, getting your perks. So I would highly recommend the Rattlebags and the Kiyi as the first two colors you buy, and then start picking up the additional colors. Look in the encyclopedia to see what they call in, and pick up the colors that you want to hunt those specific animals for. Now, I wouldn't say buy everything, the roe deer, the red deer, the moose. I wouldn't recommend buying everything right off the bat. I would pick out the ones that you want to hunt, or maybe you have a mission to hunt. I would pick up those immediately. Once you have the core collars that you really want, then step back, go ahead and get that 10x binocular. Go ahead and get the stand. Both of those are really handy to have, and I highly recommend getting both of those. But they're not core. You don't have to have them, but they're really handy, especially the stand. And if you get some of the DLCs, you start getting additional things like the giraffe stand, which is even taller. So the more you buy, the more options you have. But we're trying to kind of keep it dead simple. This is a new player who's not bought everything there is. You've got Nez Perce, you've got Transylvania. You don't have the hunter pack, you don't have the gun packs, you don't have anything except the free UTV because it's a free UTV pack. You still have to buy the UTV, but get the free UTV pack so that you can buy this stuff. Now, if you have the additional content, you have the additional maps, you have the additional gun packs, that's going to change the starter gear. So you kind of play it by ear. But that's where I would start at. So 243 because you have to. The shotgun, the Waterfowler Pro 12 gauge, it's a great option. The 21x scope, the SM12, the collars. So get the right out of the gates, get the Kiyi collar and the Rattlebag and whatever else you think you want to hunt early on. Then go pick up the stand, pick up the 10x binoculars, and then start backfilling all the rest of your purchases. And when it comes to the collars, I wouldn't even bother with the bird collars until the very end. Until they redo the birding, it's just not worth spending the time on that. But now you're at that point where you've gotten the key stuff that you need. You've gotten the stuff that you want to be able to hunt squared away with your collars. Now you can start buying all the different rifles. You can buy the additional scopes. You can buy the other collars that you haven't picked up yet. You can pack up and load up a ton of different ammo if you want. The free ammo is perfectly fine for pretty much everything. Do be aware the managed recoil is pretty weak in the 30-30. But the free ammo works for everything else fine. You don't have to worry about it. You can shoot deer at 400 meters with everything, except the managed recoil. But all the free ammo on all the big rifles, they work fine. So don't get tore up about that. Once you have everything purchased, then you can start buying the different ammo if you want to start playing with that. That's more than starter tips. That's getting kind of into the more deep things. So that's kind of where I want to stop things at here. We've really rambled on a whole lot longer than I intended, but I wanted to try to kind of cover a lot more than just a couple basic tips. Do the missions and go slow. I say that so much in chat, but I wanted to try to kind of give you guys something that you could kind of go through, look at, and kind of pick up more than just the pure basic starter tips, and kind of start getting yourself into a position to where you're understanding more about the game. You have some heads up about what's going on and how things work, just to try to help make that transition from new player to a veteran player a little easier, a little quicker, a little hopefully a little more fun, because it can be daunting at first, especially when you don't understand all of the different mechanics at play and things like that in the game, and there's a lot at play. So guys, I do appreciate you hanging on. If you made it this far, I apologize because I went through a ton of stuff, and you're probably going to have to go back and pause things or look through the index and click on different things. But I hope that this helps out, and I hope that I covered stuff that actually matters to a new player. And I hope I didn't get into too much detail on some of the things. And I hope I didn't go too far into the woods, because there's a lot more to the game. There's so much more to get into. And once you're comfortable with the game, you're getting a good feel for things, you can kind of go back and look at some of the deep dives that I've done, get into things like life cycles, herd management, all these pieces that go so much deeper than you would ever imagine when you first start the game. And it's real easy to get off into the woods with those. So I tried to kind of keep it a little more beginner level. It's not really beginner level, I guess, but introductory level, to introduce the right things to a new player to kind of help get you going the right direction. All right, guys, we're wrapping things up. We're calling it done. If you have any questions, certainly feel free to hit me up, or any of the OGs who are always around in Discord. People are always glad to help answer questions there. So hit us up there. Hit me up personally. You can DM me. I don't care. Hit it in the video chat space too. That's fine. I try to respond to everything. So certainly reach out. If I don't respond immediately, I will eventually respond. I'm not always at the computer. Some people don't believe me, but I'm not always at the computer. But feel free to reach out. All right, guys. Y'all have a good night. God bless, and happy hunting.